So today with the market open, well, let's just really kind of look at this in a realistic view. The market is still down. There's still a lot of pressure attempting to push us down even more. When we think about what's really happening here, gold and silver are both up in a massive way. We are talking about a difference of over $640 billion in combined market cap. That's how, this really kind of works. When you look at geopolitical tensions and you look at that pressure around uncertainty, yes, markets will start to change and shift, and capital is now shifting to gold and silver. In crypto, I feel as if with all of the uncertainty, especially going into 2026, I think that this was the main reason why we started to see capital fleeing crypto and going into gold and silver, especially after October 10th with that mass liquidation event. On top of this, most of the money is being invested into AI at this time. So again, almost everyone is ignoring crypto, or at least at this moment, because I do believe that this will shift. Now with XRP, there is so much FUD out there regarding XRP because of the performance of just crypto in general. Now, when we think about today's market open for stocks, the market itself did drop as well. Now, obviously, this account is kind of looking at this probably on, I don't know if it's maybe, I guess a 30-second time frame. We have here a big dump in the US stock market. S&P is down 1.08% today, wiping out 650 billion. NASDAQ is down 1.4% today, wiping out 546 billion. Dow is down 1.53% today, wiping out 340 billion. And then the Russell 2000 is down 2.01% today, wiping out $64 billion. So again, when we look at this, it's easy to look at this and say, oh, this is extremely, scary. I'm bearish. That's it. This is horrible. The markets are done. They're cooked. But then you look at the S&P 500 index, and ultimately there's no major change here at all. I have two levels here for us to really kind of watch. Main key thing that we are looking at here is, yeah, we do have a lower high structure, which is not exactly the best, but we do have a lot of support here right around 67.95. Now, we have been on the 3-day view maintaining an uptrend, and this goes all the way back here to roughly the summer of 2025. I'm watching for this to be maintained, but ultimately a daily candle close below 67.95 would pretty much break that structure. So I'm watching stocks throughout this week for any major updates, because if we do lose that low level, then yeah, we will start to see a much larger drop on the S&P and with just, markets in general around TradFi. But I will come back to this here in a moment. Now, most of the market is down today because, again, we just got another threat from Trump regarding much higher tariffs on countries that will try to play games with the U.S. Says the U.S. will hit back harder than before. And again, this is not, like, to most people in the markets that are playing with money, this is not a good sign. This is uncertainty around what's going to happen next because, again, everyone thinks that tariffs are an immediate inflow of revenue and that it's going to boost the economy. It's a long-term thing. And I've talked about this for many, I actually talked about it back in 2025. Once we started to see the tariffs announced, I even said that this is a long-term thing. It's not a short-term thing. So most of the markets could care less about the tariffs. They see it as just geopolitical tensions, potential war breaking out, or, major bounce backs from other countries. So again, they don't look at this as a bullish thing, at least in the short term, which is why a lot of money is fleeing markets and going into gold and silver, because typically gold and silver at times of, uncertainty and tensions rising globally, they start to perform very well. And even right now with the dollar being down, yeah, gold and silver is performing very well. Now with XRP and most of the markets, they're both down. And that's one thing that I want to clarify here, is that this is not an XRP problem. This is a crypto issue. If we are comparing XRP to Bitcoin in the last 1 year, guess what? we are following Bitcoin almost to a T. If we compare this to Ethereum, again, we are following Ethereum to a T. This is not an XRP issue. The only difference here that XRP has over most of these other altcoins in this space is the fact that XRP is still up off of the lows just going back to October and November. We are still up over 173%. Now, do I think that we're going to go much lower on XRP? Well, I talked about this in yesterday's video, and I'll talk about it even in this one real quick, just shortly. If this is not our bottom, if this is, pretty much an area where we are just having a slight bounce and a little bit of a break before a further cascade, move to the downside, our lifeline, our only sign of life would be holding $1.13 to $1.21. Losing this, okay, and I'll mark this as red because we do not want to see that get retested. Losing this level would allow us to retest down all the way below potentially $1 because all of our demand next would be around $1 to $1, roughly like 16, which again, if we're already breaking down below this, that's $1.13. So we're already back into this demand zone back here. So if we lose this demand zone, the only next key thing that I'm looking at here on the weekly view is retesting the prior highs of almost 90 cents. Those prior highs are the July 2023 highs. I would love for us to, pretty much avoid this and just continue. However, there's also a part of me that's very greedy and wants to buy more XRP and would absolutely love under $1 again. And I know that that sounds crazy to a lot of you out there because you're probably thinking, well, Nick, really? You want to see XRP back under $1? And ultimately speaking, yeah, I mean, it's not like when we think about this market, you want to buy the, absolute bottom, but you never get to buy the absolute bottom. You buy close to the bottom. It's like the top. You're never going to sell the exact top. But again, I don't understand why everyone is now just getting extremely bearish on XRP after having such a great rally. I mean, listen, this rally, believe it or not, was well over a 600+% rally. And again, off of the lows of the bear market, we did a 1000% move to the upside. XRP performed very well. I'm not saying that the show is completely over because I don't believe that it is. I'm just saying that we could potentially have a much larger drop on XRP before we start to see that upside move. Back here in 2021 into 2022, we dropped about 85%. 75% would bring us back down to this prior wick high. Now 80% would bring us right back down to the candle closes, aka this would be about an 81% drop down to 71 cents. And then if we're really retesting the prior highs before this macro move, this would be about 83, 84% down to about 61 cents. I just want to give you guys that overall view here. Now, do I think that we're going to avoid that? Well, ultimately, I think that a lot of this stuff is getting blown out of proportion. I did buy a lot in terms of TradFi. I put $50,000 to work. Most of this is dividends. I'm just being completely transparent with you guys. If you guys want me to create another channel where I talk about TradFi buys and things like that, because, obviously I am diversified outside of crypto, let me know, because I could definitely do that on the Crusaders channel because I recently launched that. But I said here that I made $50,000 worth of buys that I have outlined for the Crusaders group. Is this the bottom? I have no idea. And any expert telling you that they know is lying. And yes, they are. Reason for me buying. Number one, fear and greed is at 5 for Bitcoin. Sentiment is completely dead. The crowd is basically gone. RSI is at its historical all-time lows across the board. It feels uncomfortable to buy right now. Those 5 simple reasons are exactly why I'm putting capital to work right now. Can I stomach further negative price action? Sure, I'm comfortable at this point because I am certain that we will be higher at a later time. Lock in. Now, I will say this. Why am I talking about Bitcoin? Why am I talking about crypto if this $50,000 is TradFi buys? Well, because a large portion of that $50,000 is TradFi buys tied back to crypto's performance? Like, for an example, a Bitcoin index, which I did invest into. I'm just ultimately looking at this, and I'm looking at the sentiment, looking at the FUD around this market, and I just can't help but to come to the conclusion that the bottom is closer than what most people are screaming. Like, everyone is saying that we are going down to the X, Y, and Z, and that, you know, this is the typical 4-year cycle of the bear market, and that Bitcoin's going down to 30,000, 20,000. I mean, the amount of negativity that I'm seeing in the space is just absurd. But again, it's expected, especially after we, you know, just sold off in terms of altcoins for well over a year. I mean, most altcoins outside of XRP and like a few others are down only in the last like 14 months. So again, when we think about this, yeah, that negativity is to be expected, but I feel like this is even worse than, you know, most of the recent black swan events in crypto, like FTX, COVID, you know, even prior to that, you know, major hacks in history as well. Like, this is the most bearish time in crypto I've ever experienced, if I'm being honest with you guys, which is why I feel comfortable right now buying, because it feels uneasy to buy right now. But I'm also looking at putting capital to work in crypto. I have about almost $20,000 that I'm willing to, you know, part ways with, but I just don't believe that we are at the bottom yet. But the main thing that I'm looking at is altcoins like XRP that are extremely strong, that have been experiencing tremendous amounts of growth. Like, we know for a fact that XRP is starting to see a major wave of tokenization, you know, volume and demand. We're also starting to see stablecoins growing on the XRP ledger. We're starting to see a lot of growth around the fundamental side of XRP, just not the price action. Let's not forget that we know that there's so many amendments going live for XRP, like the permission domains, the permission DEX, the token escrow service, the lending protocol as well is now, I mean, we're getting a lot more votes now, about 6 yays. We're at about 17% for this. Most of the votes you could see over here, Ripple did vote yes. Persist also voted yes. There's a few here in terms of validators that also voted yes. But hey, 17%. I think the last time that we looked at this, we were at about roughly 14%. So we are moving slowly but surely to get this done and, you know, finally activated as well, alongside everything else to enable what? Institutional DeFi. We know that institutional DeFi is the key focus here for XRP. Some of the largest use cases around XRP are tied back to institutional DeFi, like, for example, on-chain FX, collateral, on-chain credit, and there's so much more that could be unlocked from this. We're really unaware of what institutional players are really planning here, but we know that on-chain FX is definitely a big one. On-chain credit, collateral, payments, tokenization at scale, enabling even, you know, more use cases, more capital flood into some of these asset classes as well. That's all now starting to become enabled on the XRP ledger. And yes, Ripple is a main player behind this. We now know that with the permission domains and the permission DEX, that Ripple can start to tap into the XRP ledger as well. We'll have to see what happens after a little bit of time, because all of these things just went live. So it's not going to be an immediate overnight shift on XRP. But I do think that fundamentally wise, XRP is starting to see some of the best updates. And I just would not be extremely bearish on XRP at this moment. Downside, in my opinion, from our current price action to the, you know, low here, this would be about a 34% drop. If we're going back down to like the prior lows, this would be about a 54% drop. So downside is definitely not like extremely limited on XRP side, but that's questionable enough if we're actually going to go this low or not. I've said it many times over in the past as well when comparing like previous bear markets on Bitcoin. Like, here we have the 2017, 2018 drop on XRP. We dropped about 97%. Then we also have our bear market of 2022. We dropped about 85%. I don't think that it's unheard of to